Really heartwarming to be here, and thank you for the invitation. Appreciate it a lot. We've been named a Center of Excellence, and I've gotten support from Toshiba Canada, which I'm very, very grateful for. And I will tell you this, I don't really consider it a disclosure or anything to be embarrassed, but I'm actually very proud to have worked for Toshiba for the last decade, including introducing wide area detector CT, and it's been terrific. And I'll tell you this, the impact on our community has been enormous. As you know, how many people here are actually just straight up Canadian citizens? And so most of you. So you've all seen this Canada Science and Technology Museum, and this is in Ottawa. It's actually right down the road from the hospital. It's being opened later on this year after several years of renovation, and this is a national treasure in terms of resources, and I'm going to take a few extra minutes just to talk about it. And I was actually asked to design a section of the hospital on 3D printing and medicine. And so I went into the archives, and it turns out that we have Canada's first CT scanner, the EMI scanner. Anyone know where that was, where it was sited? It's in Montreal. So the very first CT scanner in Canada, to the best that I can tell, was actually placed in Montreal. I have the very first X-ray tube that was in Canada, and it's like a treasure. It's like going back to the museum, looking through all this stuff. It's like incredible. And so I designed the senses, and I'm going to have every single one of those displays, and I'm going to show the history of medicine in the museum. And it just dawned on me one day that we don't actually have an MR scanner to show. And so on September 25th, I sent an email to Toshi, he's the CEO of Toshiba, and I copied Jens so that he would be informed. And I said, we really need to do something. This is an incredible opportunity. Can you make me an MRI system to put in the Canada Science Museum? It will be visited by 750,000 children every single year. Millions of people will actually walk by it and learn about imaging. And we've got the old, but we don't have the new. And I sketched out this little thing, and I don't have a pointer if you can read it, but it basically says, Toshiba leading innovation, and that's the gantry. I decided to have kind of a cutout so that kids could actually see what's inside an MRI. And I had, a tube, but it had to be, you could see there on the top left, not full width of MR unit. The depth is only 4 feet, because I didn't want to put a whole bore in there. I just wanted to put a piece of it in there. And lo and behold, the thing that you see out there is going into the Canada Science and Technology Museum, and it is absolutely amazing. And I think we owe everyone from Toshiba a round of applause for actually doing that for our community. If there was no industry partnership, it would never have happened. I promise you, if I'd gone to any other vendor, it would have never happened. And so I'm incredibly proud to have disclosures that I've worked with Toshiba for the last decade. So that was my extra 2 minutes. I just wanted to say that because I didn't know it was going to be there, and when I walked into the room this morning, I was completely blown away. So I want to talk about 3D printing. And for the folks here who have never heard about 3D printing, this will be an introduction to y'all. And for the people that know about it, it'll be a little bit of an update in terms of where we are. 3D printing is on its way into the practice of medicine for sure, and it'll get itself to reimbursement and to your practice sometime, certainly within the next 5 years, but maybe even slightly before that. So anytime you want to make something, there's 2 ways to do it. You can start with a block of stuff and whittle away, your David, and have your medical device that's whittled away, or you can 3D print it. And there is a large push towards actually 3D printing things. Many of you came here in a car or an airplane. The key parts of those planes or those cars were actually 3D printed. And for good reason. I'd much rather have that come off of a 3D printer than actually someone there twiddling around and milling it. And you can actually see here on the bottom left-hand side, that's actually a massive 3D printer along a Boeing airplane wing. And the key parts of the plane are actually being 3D printed onto the machine. So I want to talk about 3D printing as a new method to display imaging data, to show indications where 3D printing has moved beyond niche applications, and basically just to give you some ideas. I have no problem giving me your ideas and having you run with them. I actually want that. I know that I'll have more, and I know that I'll think of stuff along the way, and I want you to kind of be inspired by it, especially people who have not been exposed to it, because it's that collective enthusiasm that's really going to make, it's going to change things. So this is Jim Euchre's famous paper in 1965. This is before I was born. And this was the first paper where there was actually an imaging display that showed a morphology. So this is the classic paper where you could actually see with a fluoroscope and some barium, a lesion and the surface texture of the lesion. It completely changed the way we think about medicine. This one image completely changed medicine because for the first time, you could actually use 10 cents worth of barium and an x-ray tube and make a diagnosis inside someone's body that you never could before. Complete game changer. This is the first cardiac CT that I can find in the literature that is really published in the literature. It was actually published by Marty Lipton, who used to work for me in Boston. 1983, and that was the best image that you could possibly acquire at the time, and that is a cardiac CT, and that L stands for left ventricle because back then no one had ever even seen what the heart looks like on CT, right? So actually showing what the left ventricle might look like on a CT scan. This type of rendering, again, completely changed medicine, not just radiology, completely changed medicine altogether. This is Elliot Fishman's classic paper. This is the beginning of it for Shadpur, who's in the audience somewhere. And I did get triple my time because Dimitri and Shadpur both have worked for me for years, and so I actually get an hour and a half of talking. They just actually do the talking for me, which is great. Shadpur now works for Elliot. So this is the classic paper from Elliot, and if you look at that spine, you think, oh my gosh, that's like no big deal, right? I'll tell you this, in 1991, this image was a big deal. It completely changed everything in medicine. It allowed volume rendering, and it was the dawn of actually looking at a workstation. And there's someone from Vital back in the back there. This was the image that actually allowed volumetric data to be viewed and to be displayed and to be appreciated in a completely different way. And some of the things that Elliot said there, which you can read, is really relevant for 3D printing. It talks about today's computer workstation. It's so much 10 times the capacity. The dramatic decrease in this price-to-performance ratio allows for practical, low-cost, fast 3D imaging. You could just replace the word imaging for printing, and it's completely appropriate for today. And it talks about radiologists can play a dominant role in the future direction of imaging, just change that to 3D printing, by working with their colleagues in radiation therapy, oncology, and orthopedics, which is exactly what's happening now in the realm of 3D printing. It's just we're going from what I call 3D visualization to a new display where you're going to have a CT scan, and out of that CT scanner is going to come a 3D model. And don't think it's a surprise. GE has ads about how they're going to do this. I promise you they'll have a total mock-up at RSNA either this year or next where there's actually nothing to it, but there'll be a little scanner and there'll be a thing like out of the circus, and out will come the model. It's coming, and it'll happen for real as soon as 3D printing is reimbursed. It'll happen for real, and it will completely change the landscape of how we do things for the right indication. You don't 3D print everything, but there are things that you cannot live without. So in making this talk, I'm kind of planning a little bit for how RSNA will kind of shake out this year, but I want to talk a little bit about artistic license and introduce it, because whenever we do a volume rendering, it really is a sense of artwork. And reconstructive surgeons actually get this all the time. They're able to do this artistic stuff, but they're never able to really plan it. And now with 3D printing, you really have an enormous amount of artistic rendering and artistic work, and you can actually take the science of CT and MR and even 3D ultrasound, and you can convert that into your own artwork. And so we're really becoming as much artists as scientists in 3D printing. And there's plenty of ability to make mistakes, and there's plenty of ability to use that artistic license in the right way, but also the wrong way. And so we really have to think about how we're going to regulate it. And the wide area detector CT was introduced at RSNA in 2006. And in 2008, we showed these images that you're looking at. These images are almost a decade old. Most of them were actually made by Chloe Stevenson, but some of them were made by others. And I think if you look at them in the right way, you realize that there is a whole lot of artwork in terms of that. And anyone that's played around with the Vitrio workstation or even with the Toshiba console knows that there's that artistic work. This is a 3D volume rendering from one of my other students, Mike Stagner. I think this was published in some big journal. I can't remember which one. I wasn't an author on it, but you have to say this was just straight up from a CT image, right? And with the proper coloring and the proper coding. And so volume rendering in itself is artwork. This is one of Shadpor's images, and this is a paper that Shadpor published in Radiology. And I will tell you that there's a fair amount of artistic license in actually what that aneurysm looks like, where the thrombus is, where the blood pool is, an enormous amount of sculpting. And so there's a lot to do that in 3D printing that actually is very artistic. Before I left for Canada, I worked very closely with some of my colleagues in Boston on face transplantation. You can see on the right-hand side, this is one of our patients. 3D printed models in the STL file, the file format for 3D printing, and showing the bony tissues and the soft tissues and actually 3D printing the model. And it really shows kind of on the left, the CT and the scientific side, and then on the right, the models that you can make and how they can be used to either predict loss of tissue or to actually help design the actual face transplantation. So some of the observations are on this slide. I won't read them straight out, but we've always had the ability to be artistic in terms of our visualization tools. Now it's completely up the ante that. And I see radiologists and technologists that are doing this as actually contributing, to actually the art of medicine in a way that we never could before. And I think that's incredibly exciting. I think it's incredibly groundbreaking because we've never been able to do it. It's always had these artistic overtures, but now it's actually there. And the message that I want to give you, and this is the exact same message that from 2006, before wide area detector CTE was born, right, is that we need to simplify things that are complex. One of the reasons why Toshiba has the best CT equipment is the machine largely simplifies it, right? You have a single rotation, you have a single volume. Things that are complicated that can be made simple are successful. Things that are complicated, that stay complicated and confuse people are not successful, right? And so what we need to do in the realm of actually when we deliver 3D models to our surgeons who will love us forever for it and will demand us to take it. Everyone that's done 3D printing now is completely swamped. I have a wait list for 3D printing that's over a year long. We've had a lab for 2 months, right? So, you have to keep it simple, you have to do it right, and you have to put the patient in the center and focus on it. So these are some of Dimitri's slides, and Dimitri's going to talk about something else, and so I wanted to show some of his slides. On the right is a Pancoast tumor, and you can see the actual image on the bottom right-hand corner, and that's a model that he made, and the tumor's in the black, and some of the bones in the white, the aorta's in the gray. And there's a cardiac defect on the bottom, and actually deploying a stent with it, that's on the top left-hand side. And whoever's deploying that stent hadn't done very many of them, I can tell, but maybe it was you, Dimitri, that actually was trying to deploy the stent. They didn't know how to do it, but it actually does deploy and actually opens up and it fills the defect. So the ability to actually have a model that you can practice on, that you can show the patient so they actually know what they have, which is groundbreaking in terms of patient consent and communication and our advocacy and what we deliver to our patients is there. And then the ability to practice and to actually do things is also extraordinary. So this is from Sick Kids. This is CJNU's model. And right now, it is absolutely malpractice to treat a patient with complex congenital heart disease without practicing first on the model. Making the model, understanding it, and practicing on it. In fact, these folks from the trial that they're starting to develop, they were trying to randomize little kids into those who would be treated without a model versus those who would be treated with a model, and every single investigator, potential investigator, said it'd be completely unethical to run such a study because we can't do a patient, we can't take care of a baby without a model. There's also a ton of reconstructive procedures. So it's not just cardiac, it's musculoskeletal, it's tumors, it's in the body, it's in the chest. So reconstructive surgeons actually, like I said before, they get to be artistic. But in the operating room, you only have so much time, right? And so you're limited by time. You can actually take a fibula and bend it over time in the back table of an operating room. And you can shape it and you can mold it. But actually making guides and planning these things out and then 3D printing the models, it's not just our kids that are doing this in their school. We actually can do this and plan all of these procedures ahead of time. And in all of these cases, maxillofacial, you've got a shoulder there, you've got a knee replacement, and you've got a cutting guide for the fibula that's going to reconstruct the jaw. All of those things are enormously beneficial. That case on the left-hand side, it's a 10-hour case that was made into 3 hours by just planning and knowing exactly how to cut the bone and actually making the guide. So you're actually 3D printing the cookie cutter that goes on and actually cuts the bone. So you know exactly where the cut's going to be. You know that it's going to fit, and you know exactly what to do with the pieces once they're done. So why? Why now are we able to do it? The reason is, like many things, is all about money. And so 3D printing has positively influenced every sector that it's entered. It's completely revolutionized architecture. It's completely changed the automotive industry. It's completely changed aerospace. But it's been too expensive to actually be integrated into an already bulky medical environment where a large amount of our GMP is actually spent in medicine. Now the scanners are cheaper, the materials are cheaper. They're still expensive, don't get me wrong. They're still expensive, and it takes an investment to actually start this. But the prices come down substantially, and so now physicians can actually put these in their labs. They can put them in their homes. You can put a small one of these in their office. Actually, in our library at the University of Ottawa, we have 2 printers that they run 24/7, just by the medical students printing anatomic stuff that they think is cool. So many people talk about how to actually do it, and many places in Canada and the world are now starting labs. You really, if you want to do this, you can start small and you can start with a $1,000 printer, but you really need a 3D printing committee to actually attract engagement and to make sure that all the stakeholders are at the table when you actually do have a 3D printing lab. And bioprinting is not down the road. I have a separate talk on bioprinting I'm not going to share with you, but suffice it to say that the ability to print skin is very straightforward and done, and now printing vessels is done, and it'll only be a matter of a decade, maybe 15 years or so, when actual tissues and organs are actually 3D printed, like eliminating the need for a huge part of the transplantation medicine, and really, pushing us to the next level of where we're going to be in medicine. And so sci-fi is really reality in terms of these technologies. This is a slide that was made for me. Actually, most of the slides are made for me. Actually, the only slide I really made was that first one with the Toshiba MRI, which I actually just made this morning, and I made them stick in the talk. So how do you do it? So we all do imaging. We all do imaging very well. One thing that you can do is the blue line. You can actually outsource everything. So you can actually take your CT DICOMs. You can send them somewhere, and I can, give you information on where to send them. You could send them to Materialize, many different companies, and they will work with you, and they will actually send you back a model that you can use. And when I arrived in Ottawa, there was actually a budget to do that. The budget was about $150,000 a year, where the reconstructive and the plastic surgeons actually had a budget, and they sent their stuff out, and they got their stuff back. They quietly did it. It came in little boxes that were unmarked, but they did it. They sent their DICOMs out, and that's the way they did it. You could take the second route. Looks like it went well as I was talking. You could take the second route, and you could do the imaging, and then you can go down to the 3D modeling line, do that yourself. So you can actually post-process the images and get the desired outcome that you want, and then ship it out, and you still get a little box. But now you've designed the thing yourself, and so you've actually done a lot of the artistic thinking, and you've designed the part that you want, and you've got what you need. Or you can do the orange line, which is there, and do it all by yourself. And I urge you to think about how you're going to start. And some people here will wait. Some institutions will actually wait till 3D printing is reimbursed, and then they'll start. Some people, the early adopters, that's over. Like the early adopter phase is done. Kind of the late early adopters, that second stage is kind of where we are now. And you can do any of these things, but you can actually start a lab and go that orange line for not a lot of time, but not a lot of money, actually. So there's all kinds of ways that you can actually learn about models, and you can actually do them. So the 3D Print Exchange is on the right, and it's a program from the NIH. I actually met with a person last week from NIH. I was down there visiting, and a place where you can actually upload your ideas for 3D printed models. But if you want to 3D print something and you don't want to have to design it, you can actually download the file and put it on your $500 printer and print it. So you can actually take an infrastructure, a library of images and files, and actually take them and actually go ahead and 3D print them. And so I encourage people to interact with that site, reorganizing it in a way so that it will be more organ section developed, and so it'll kind of fit into our own radiology mold. But very exciting ways to have repositories for imaging. This is just 2016. I'm not going to go through everything on this slide, but that little thing on the top where you see the RSNA 2016, that little guy right there, the pink thing, is actually when you go to RSNA. There is one of those little brochures, like this one that says neuroradiology, one that says musculoskeletal radiology. There is one of those pamphlets that says 3D printing. And that 3D printing is the RSNA's commitment to actually working through 3D printing, and I'll talk about the special interest group kind of when we're done. But suffice it to say that it's 3D printing is well recognized as being highly important. This is a musculoskeletal application. This is Leo Sheplev, who's absolutely brilliant resident actually in Ottawa. He reminds me enormously of Dimitri, and so I liken the two of them to each other, except Leo's way taller. He's like a foot taller than Dimitri, but they both are the same. I'll tell a story. Do I have time to tell a story? I'll tell a story just for a second. There's so many stories I could tell you guys. So the day that I met Dimitri was probably, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago. And he was working somewhere else and everything and doing something, and I was coming to Boston, and he wanted to introduce himself to me. And so he decides to send me an email. He sends me an email. The email, I am not kidding you, the email is 4,000 words. It like runs off the page. The entire email was one sentence. It was one sentence and no paragraph breaks. It's just this rambling thing. So lo and behold, and Dimitri's a genius, and you'll figure that out. You know, I'll be on the plane to wherever I'm going, but you'll figure that out when he talks. So I show up in Ottawa. Lo and behold, I can't believe my eyes. Like the 15th email I got, you know, of the 400 email days, is one gigantic email. It's like 4,000 words. It's all one sentence, and that email is from Leo. So remember this guy. He's actually a brilliant engineer, and he works for us, and he actually has done enormous parts in establishing 3D printing in medicine, which is our Springer journal, and I encourage you to go to that website. I'll give you the website. And he's taught an entire generation of radiologists how to do 3D printing at RSNA through the courses. So if you're going to RSNA, please look into going to one of the hands-on courses where you can actually use the software, see the printers, and actually do it live. This is Andy Christensen. Andy Christensen is really one of the pioneers of 3D printing. He actually owned the company Medical Modeling, which he sold at a young age to 3D Systems, and then went into retirement with the money. But he's actually come back and is actually now works with me very closely, and we're kind of partners in crime in a strange industry academic way. But this is a great read. This is all part of all in the journal, and very free and easy to read and a great download. And what Andy's done in this table, which I think is a little too colorful, but it is what it is to kind of break down 3D printed models into three categories. So I'll explain those to you. The first category, it says anatomic models, that's what we call a category 1. And this is aligned with the FDA, and it's going to be aligned with Health Canada as soon as I get them on board. There is an advantage of being in Ottawa in that regard, because you have the government people right close to you. An anatomic model is when all you want to do is you want to 3D print something that directly portrays the anatomy in the image. So if we do a CT scan of your shoulder because you've got a complex shoulder that needs to be reconstructed, and we don't change it. We just want it for planning. That's an anatomic model. That is not a medical device. Right? All it is the next way that we're going to display our information. You could print it out on film. You could, and this is how I sold it to the FDA. You could print it out on film. You could put it on volume rendering and put it on your screen, or you could take that exact same data and 3D print it and hand it to someone, right? And so it is film 50 years later. It's just a volumetric model. If you change that model at all, it becomes either a class 2 or a class 3 model. So if we take that same shoulder and we jig it because we're going to do a surgery and figure out a cut, then we have a modified anatomic model where we do what's called major changes. You can see that in the red right in the middle. We don't just do minor little cleanup things. We actually change it. And if we actually are going to plan the surgery or use some type of virtual reality tool combined with 3D printing, or we're actually going to dramatically change it, then it's a planning with a template, and we're looking at a class 2 medical device by FDA standards. So we're looking into, actually building medical devices with 3D printing. So I want to just introduce that to you because that's the way that the different things will be templated. This is a patient with Crozon's disease, and this is just a model that's used on the blue table in the surgery, and they actually cut the model up just to plan how they're going to do different pieces of it. That's a group 1 model. A group 2 model is this patient that had an injury where we actually taking one side, taking the healthy side, mirroring it, and then designing a bone graft that we're actually going to put in. So that's a class 2 model. And a class 3 model is this dental device. We're actually going to reconstruct the entire jaw, make a material that's going to form where the gum line's going to be, where the teeth are going to be, all kind of jigged out. And so you can actually reconstruct this person's face. That would be a group 3 or a class 3 model. So let me summarize. So 3D printing is no longer niche applications. Like, it's been used for a long time in medicine, and now it's here to stay, and it is the way that we actually deliver medical information. There's lower cost and greater awareness that 3D printing can enhance care. And the entire industry, right now in terms of medicine, is about 2% of the entire 3D printing, and it's been expected to go to 1.9 billion. And every estimate from Forbes and Wall Street Journal is held on. So the 2013 estimate was right on the money, all the way up to now is right on the money in terms of what the estimates are. There are enormous number of patient impact, and really we're doing this for the patient experience, for their families, for their patients. We have fewer complications. You can look at all the different things, but there's no question that 3D printing enhances patient care. That's a done deal. It's actually getting that data and accumulating it to get to reimbursement that I show you on this slide that's important, because right now we have cases and we have case reports and we have websites, we have blogs, we have people that are interested, but we need to get to the proof in order to get to the reimbursement. So I'll sum up. 3D printing is the new visualization tool. The successful people in the field is going to be the next generation of folks. And we're kind of talking about Shadpur and the different people where they are in their career. People that are in their early to mid-career now, those people who simplify things will enter this field and make a huge impact. And these are some of the things that we need to do. I'll have a quick discussion about the 3D printing special interest group. So over the last few years, I've lobbied very hard RSNA to actually create a 3D printing group. And so RSNA has been the same for a long, long time. There's never been a spin-off type of membership. Everything that's in RSNA happens within the society. For the first time and now available is a special interest group in 3D printing, and they're going to do this for all different types of things. And so there'll be MR special interest groups, there'll be CT special interest groups, but the first one is the 3D printing special interest group. So if you're a member of RSNA, or you want to be part of the 3D printing special interest group, you can join RSNA through an entirely new membership tract, and you could be part of the special interest group. We have a website. We have interests. We meet roughly three times a year, and we're developing the guidelines that are actually going to lead 3D printing into medicine in a big way. So you can go to the RSNA website. If you got the little RSNA thing, the flyer that you get from RSNA every quarter, on the back of it, it shows, the back cover is all about this special interest group. It's going to be that way for several years in the future. So I encourage you to look into that. And feel free to email me. Everyone who emails me, I will reply to your email. I'll answer every single one of them. The journal website is there. And anyone that needs anything, let me know, and I'll try my best to help you as much as possible. Thanks very much.